Hi, everybody. In a few moments, I chat with Dmitry Lyalin, someone who I work with professionally for many years across multiple companies. We chat about everything ranging from how he got started with programming, his experience across various engineering disciplines, and of course, a favorite topic for us, a lot of things around product management. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Right, Dimitri, great to chat with you. For the audience, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, folks. My name is Dmitry Lyalin. Currently, I'm a product manager at Google, same place Karupa works right now, and I'm excited to be here. Karupa and I have crossed paths many years, and I'm so glad we're back together again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thanks for taking the time to chat as well. One of the things I always found really interesting about you is that you've always had this like deep passion for computers and programming and just that whole world of working with developers, which is how you and I got connected many years ago. So how did it get started? Not everyone wakes up one day and says, I can't wait to spend time working with developers, learning about their problems and just solving things for them. So I'm curious to know what your journey was in this.
Sure, I'd love to talk to you about it. Well, I found computers in school. I was in public school back in Brooklyn, New York. I was a little kid, and PCs were like 386s or 286 machines were appearing running Microsoft DOS. And one of those machines had like a game, like a QBasic game. So the teacher opened up QBasic and they said, hey, this is code and it's a game, and they run it and the game ran, and my career was made basically. Like that was the magical moment. I saw that as a I don't know, I'm gonna say maybe like 9 year old, 10 year old, something like that. I could be messing it up, but I was pretty young. And I just started to just harass my parents endlessly that I really, really wanted to get a computer. And this was just a little bit of luck. My parents, didn't have a lot of money. We were immigrants to America at that time. My father was working two jobs. All the usual stories apply. But I was their only child, and I really wanted something, and I claimed that it was going to be really great for me. And so they finally, a couple of years later, bought me an IBM 486SX, and that's where I wrote like my first piece of code with my own hands on my own computer. And I think it's probably why we're talking today.
What programming language were you using?
QBasic. That was my
QBasic,
first language.
your
Yeah.
first language. And we had the IBM. Was it running Windows 3.1 at the time, or was it still DOS?
Yeah. 3.1 and DOS. Like my cousin taught me how to do DOS commands and how to edit auto exec files and stuff. And then, in Windows, I learned how to use the UI and run all the applications. It was such a magical time. I mean, I feel blessed that I got to see computers in such a kind of simple state, but already just powerful enough to have programming languages that were accessible to kids like me who had no education, or like I didn't know anyone who coded. It was like completely just myself. I saw something in school, and years later I was doing it directly, because even in school we didn't have like a programming course or anything. This was a random chance moment where a teacher showed us something, and years later I got to do it myself and just fell in love with it. Yeah, that's where my journey began.
How did you learn how to use QBasic? Were you using some books, or what was your path there?
It's hard to remember, right? I don't want to lie to your audience, but I'm sure it was books. I mean, there was no internet to go to. Eventually, three of us or four of us in my class, we all kind of started to program. And I know we taught each other things, and I was probably the worst programmer out of all my friends. Two of my friends are still, software engineers today, just like me. So that really stuck with all of us at that time. But I remember the first probably year I was by myself. I discovered bulletin boards, so I started to like connect to bulletin boards, like early internet. I remember someone showing me the first browser. I think it was Netscape One or something. And I didn't even think about the internet as the future at that time. It was like, oh, it's this local computer. You do things on the computer, and then you connect to these BBSs, bulletin boards, and you socialize. You get files from them. You learn things. You play multiplayer games. That was a thing that was starting, where it was like you take a turn on the bulletin board, and the next person calling in took a turn. So I kept seeing this potential, and it really just stuck with me so badly that I just learned how to program over the years. Eventually, I kept on the Microsoft track, starting with QBasic. Then I learned Visual Basic. Then I became a Visual Basic developer at my first job. I didn't go to college. I just went to a startup right after high school. I was in love. I did a lot of things that if my son tries to do, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I was like, let's just skip this college thing. I think I know what my future is, and it was really, looking back, it was such a reckless, such a scary thing to do. But at the time, I was 18. I was brave or stupid. I don't know. You pick the right word there. And I learned program. I was like a web developer, like a very basic web developer. I knew JavaScript a little. I knew CSS, HTML. There were no frameworks to learn. Thank God. I was just basically doing everything raw. And Visual Basic was my backend. Classic ASP, and it was like I remember getting my first job, right out of high school. Like I applied to a startup, and they were so hungry. Those were the .com days before the crash. They're like, "Oh, you have a pulse? All right, come. You can program. Great. Here's a job for a small, tiny salary." But it didn't feel like that to me at the time. And I started coding for real, and I remember having that moment of like, wow, this is real. Like I thought this is where I could get, and I got here, and I attribute a lot of luck in my journey, so to speak.
Yeah, and did you find that making a transition from just programming things for fun and then going to the job, was there a big leap in things you had to learn and understand on the fly, or were you already well prepared from your already experimentations?
Oh, it was a leap. So I built the website for my friend's father's music business. That was my first real paid gig. And the fact that he paid me just shows how nice he was, because I messed up the project as far as I'm concerned. I did not deliver on any of my promises, but it was the first time I had to do something on a schedule, on a deadline, and ship it out for another human being. And it was stressful and scary. It was probably the first time I had that work stress feeling in my whole life, that we all now know from our real jobs. And transitioning to his first real job, the things that were surprising to me, somebody who again had no formal education in this, there was a system to track bugs. All of a sudden, I had to look in that system. I think we used Jira at the time. I had to look in there. I had to see what was assigned to me. I had to be accountable for closing things in a timely fashion. I had to learn a database. I had never, for my own purposes, I was just doing pure web development, static HTML content and maybe some dynamic backend thing, but it was not data connected. Nowadays, everything's data connected, so it sounds crazy, but back then, there wasn't as much of it. So I had to learn databases. I had to learn how to be part of a project team, and I was very lucky that I had mentors. It's why to this day I really try to mentor every human I can, because I think the few people who took care for me in that first job, and like this one gentleman who, his name is Rudy. He was a wonderful guy, still a wonderful guy. He sat me down. He taught me how to do database development. Like he literally said, "Look, you can't do this job we hired you for unless you know how to write a SQL script." And if you don't have people like that in your life gets a lot harder. So I always encourage people to, help others, because we just have each other, man. That's all.
Yeah, that's so very true. And one of the things I will touch back with you a little bit later on is, you mentioned you didn't go to college and then you went straight into the job market. And we see a lot of conversations that came up, especially when it comes to computers and technology and so on, is it even important to have a degree? Because many of us did, some of us did go to college and we were underprepared anyway with the job market. We had the same leap that you described where translating from what was academic and theoretical and, sandbox environments to real examples was just like a massive amount of relearning. And so I'm curious to get your take on it. If you have a son now, how would your guidance on, if his interests were in computer science and wanting to do more computers, how will your guidance change, or would it be the same for him as well?
Yeah, I think, when I did it, I call it really crazy because of just the time that it was. If I didn't make it, in the programming field without the degree, I was in trouble, right? Like at that time, there really wasn't, hey, take this boot camp, become an engineer kind of world. So it was just a different time. So I definitely see my own experience as being, just because of when it was, kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that really scary thing. Now that I look back at it today, it would be less scary. Today, there's a lot of options for people to take a course, learn, and it's more acceptable that this is how people become software engineers. What I think I would still tell young people, well, I don't like to tell people what to do. I don't like to tell a young person, hey, you have to go to college, like, or some path. Like they need to figure it out for themselves. There's no two journeys that are alike. But I'll tell them what my opinion is. My opinion is, if you have the support of your family, if you have time, college is not a bad investment. You can learn things there. You don't have to leave college as software engineer. You can become a software engineer while you're in college. It's kind of my mindset. So you can learn so much nowadays for great training courses that are really on point to turn a human into a software engineer that can be part of a team. So you can do all of that. But in college, you can take other courses. You can learn math. You can learn science. You can learn how to interact with people. Things that if you rush in, past all of that into work, you're going to miss those experiences. And obviously, it's time, it's money. So you have to really, it's not, there's no like simple answer. It's a calculation. You have to do that calculation for yourself and think about it. But I always would tell like my own son, let's use that as you gave an example. I would tell him, here's some reasons why I think you should, and we'd have a conversation about it. Beyond that, he's 4 years old. I'm not sure I'm ready for that talk.
No, that's very true. I have a 5-year-old daughter, so these are all things that in the back of her mind always just keeps going in. It's like, how would life be different for them 13, 14 years on the road? Because the world has changed so much. If you look 14 years in the past in each of our lives, and how the world reacts to education and on-the-job training and so on. So that's always it's a fun topic, and one we'll probably be chatting about much further, years and years into the future.
Yeah.
Now, so you're doing your startup. What next? Because I'm curious. Like how, because you and I touched base. You were in marketing and you were at Microsoft, but it's a big jump between many things between then and there. So I'm trying to connect the dots between how your passion for programming ultimately led you down that path.
Yeah, I feel like this conversation is almost like a 3D version of my LinkedIn profile. It's like,
Yeah,
how did Dimitri get
exactly.
here? So one of the things that I really enjoyed as being a software engineer, and I was a software engineer like for about 12 years. So I was, started when I was 18, and for 12 years I went from the most junior person on a team to like a team lead. I managed people probably poorly back then. I've learned a lot since then. I architected solutions, and one of my superpowers that I developed that I realized like I'm not the best engineer on the team often, like very, very often. I'm just being very honest with you. It's not that my output was bad, but there was always somebody who was like, oh, yeah, I code C++ games in my spare time. And I was like, Jesus, I never even opened C++, in my professional career to make something production. So I was always a higher level programmer, but I solved problems, right? That was like something that I was passionate about. Who's our customer? Let me talk to them. Often in the early days, I didn't have customers outside of the company. I was doing something inside a company to benefit some business unit. So I would go and meet them, and I would show up on the floor with business people, and I would tell them, "Hey, I'm your engineer," and they'd be like, "What are you doing here? Nobody's ever come." Like we just like magically send emails to you folks, and things appear, for us as software products. And I cared about the humans, and I still have friends from those days, like people who were not engineers but working became my customers, who are still my friends because that's how I approached every problem. I approached it from a human centric approach first, like who's our team, what are their skills? Who are our customers? What are their problems? What solution can we deliver for them? On what timeline? Let's involve them early in reviewing the requirements of the thing we're building. A lot of these practices today are pretty normal, but back then, I swear, they just weren't. Teams were siloed away from their customers. They deliver solutions after months or years. The solutions were not the right solutions, often, right, or missing key features. And they would go on these long, everybody was upset at each other. And I was like, why don't we solve that by talking? And I also realized I can talk to other teams. So often I would get in a situation in one company, it was like, well, it's the networking team, like that was like a thing. And I was like, what do you mean? Who is it? Like, who's the human? Where are they? Which floor do they sit? Let's go talk to them. And I went and talked to them, and we became again like friends. Like, yeah, Dimitri needs a deployment out, it's emergency. We'll do it because we like him, because he talks to us, because he respects what we do. And I found that was my superpower. So my career towards the end of that 12-year journey, I was tired as a software engineer. I had just finished shipping a very major product to production. I was working 6 days a week, nights and weekends. I was the team lead. I had like 3 engineers under me. I wasn't their manager, but I was basically telling them what code to complete, what to write. I was writing code. I was working with UX. I was working with the customer, and I was exhausted. I'm like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. It was a very scary moment. And like, I thought that 18-year-old me thought this is my path forward. And 12 years later, me was like, holy no, like, like, is there anything else I can do? I'm tired. And I looked at, and I was at Microsoft at that time as a consultant. So I was working for customers and I had shipped like 5 production customer applications during like 4.5 years of that work. And there was another team of engineers that did like training and mentoring. And they also help customers with support issues. Is the premier field engineering team at Microsoft. And one of my former managers in consulting went over there and became a manager of these engineers. And he and I just had the same idea. We almost like at the same time asked each other, "Hey, can we talk?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm hiring a support engineer. Do you want to be a support engineer?" I was like, "Yes, please, anything. Just give me something fun to do. I'd love to train a customer, mentor a customer." And I was like, "What's the interview?" And back then it was like one interview. It was like, "You're hired. Like, I know you. I've worked with you for years. Like, you're a good engineer. You can do this job." I was like, "That's the easiest. That's probably the easiest job offer I ever got." So I accepted, and I spent a year and a half doing crazy stuff. Like one customer, like totally randomly, teach our Visual Basic team C#. And I was like, "Great, where's our course?" And the team was like, "What course? We don't have a course. Go build it." So I built like my own from the ground up C# course. And I used to be a VB programmer, so I understood their language and what they were going through. And I did the same transition myself a couple of years before. So I sat there with like six customers in Texas, and I told them C# over like 2 or 3 day workshop that I totally customized. And again, I still talk to some of them. Like they apparently liked what I did, and I was so inspired by it. Like, wow, I can teach people, I can educate them, and I was doing like evangelism for Visual Studio releases to these customers. Again, always to a customer. So me to like 3 to 5 to 6 people at most. Um, and then one of my friends, another friend at Microsoft who I loosely knew, Brian, he reached out to me and said, or I reached out to him. We got connected somehow. And he's like, "Hey, there's this job opening that as a premier, he knew what premier engineers did. He's like, if you want to do what you're doing now, but at huge scale, like educate, but educate at huge scale, you got to check out this marketing job." And I thought he was crazy. I was like, "Marketing? Why? I'm not a marketer. I don't have a marketing degree. Those are my expectations." And he's like, "Just talk to this manager." And this manager turned out to be a former premier support engineer. So he was exactly me in the past. And he's like, "Oh, I know what you do really well. And imagine doing what you do at scale and you have a passion for developers." At that time, I guess I should also add, I started speaking at user groups. And this was another like coincidental skill that helped my career because, talking in front of people, presenting, that's a skill worth developing. And I didn't have it. I was good with a small group. If you would have put me back then in front of a group of like 50 people I didn't know, I would just be terrified, shaking, unable to like every your body just like rejecting the idea of doing this thing. And I forced myself to a stage over and over and over till I get good at it. And I got to the point where I wasn't afraid anymore. So I came to this marketing job and they were like, "Well, you're going to have to, you know, execute at scale, like promote Visual Studio at scale, work on websites, work on business development. You're going to have to even speak at conferences and things." And I was like, wow, I'm putting all these skills I've kind of picked up by chance of life, my programming skills, my presentation skills, my evangelism skills for this job. And I became a marketer through that chance. And it was one of the best times of my life. I spent 7 years there. I did so many things. I couldn't even begin to talk about them, but it's where we crossed paths.
Yeah, no, that's actually really interesting, and I want to step back a little bit because teaching is an art. Not everyone is very good at being able to teach people, yet you seem to have been a natural at it. How did that come about? Was it just you just are generally naturally a great teacher, or was it something you picked up as skills over your career?
Yeah. So the way that I've approached it, I think whenever I taught people, and I've done like workshops at Microsoft events, I've done this like smaller train scheme. So I've done a bunch of training, and I've always come to it from a very simple perspective. If I didn't know this topic, what would I want people to tell me if I was just starting out, right? So my view is always that that's all training is. If you can make it so that if the you before you knew this topic got all the information in the right order, then the person you're telling to is probably going to get it too, right? So it's not. I don't have any more of a script than that, and I just applied it and I tried to break things up. I always believe in this idea of that there's any topic can be broken down into many smaller chunks so people can learn it progressively, and then the rest is just kind of caring about your audience, right? Like taking the time, being prepared, practicing, going through every example, making sure everything you're asking them to practice actually works. This is where the tediousness that I have of like, I like things to be well done, was really paying off, right? I spent a bunch of time trying to make sure that my labs were working, my script was right, my code samples on screen were accurate. And then if people needed help, if it needed me to come over and talk to them, look at their problem, because I broke things up, I could always come to you and help you through it. So in my five or so times that I've delivered like a formal training to customers, I always followed that model and it worked. And in later years, I had really great partners helping me out. So I remember a big TechEd event. TechEd was a Microsoft conference back in the day, and we had hundreds of people want to take this topic, and I could not have done it by myself. And that's where the superpower of other humans comes in. Like, have friends who are willing to help you, and reach out to them and say, "Hey, you want to do this workshop together? You want to take half the content, for me? I can't complete this in time." And that's another way that you can be good at what you do. Take other people's help alongside the journey. People want to help you more than you know is my suggestion to young people all the time.
Yeah, one of the biggest fears is just asking for help in the first place. It's
Yes.
I don't know why, but at least my impression I've always seen in the industry and in general is that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And I'm always like, no, it's actually not. It's actually a great thing. It's actually one of the biggest things you can do to both scale and also just get things done and collaborate and also make people along the way who will become your friends and your colleagues and so on.
Yeah, for sure. Asking people for help is one of the best ways to make a friend possible, right? As long as it's a genuinely good reason, right? Nobody likes to have their time wasted. But I always tell people, like, look, if you ping me in chat, no matter what the topic is, and you're like, Dimitri, please, can you help me? I get random people all the time, and I'm so happy to help, right? It's To me, it's a great feeling that I reflect how I feel in others. I think others feel like me, and I've seen it from them over the years.
Absolutely. So you're doing marketing now at Microsoft. This is when you and I crossed paths quite a bit. It was probably in the Visual Studio org or the developer division. My
Yeah.
memory's getting fuzzier as the years go by. It's a transition though, because you were doing trainings for companies in your role as marketing, but now you are. My memory is you're working with product teams on how to plan launches, how to better adjust the narrative for things like that. That's a shift in terms of what we've done before. So how did that come about?
Yeah, yeah. Well, sort of like let's talk about what marketing was for me, right? Again, a very personal journey. I was in a very special team at a very special time. We were part of the marketing organization, and pretty much nobody on my team was a marketer. We were all software engineers, one way or another, or people who just found the passion for this space through through their hobbies. And we had a very difficult job. We had to market to developers at scale of Microsoft. So the way we did it was to ignore marketing and focus on what would I want to see from Microsoft to get my attention? How would I want to be communicated with? What kind of level of trust would I want to be given, transition to me? Like all of these things were how we built the things we did, and we launched Visual Studio releases. We collaborated on better blogs, better documentation. We did things that traditional marketers don't focus on, but when you're a marketing team for developers, your first question in any product launch is, do you have documentation? And if you're an engineer, you ask that question because that's the first thing your customers are going to look for once they discover this product. So I really spent a lot of time being a developer, having that perspective. And marketing, it was a wonderful time. It allowed me to do a lot of different kind of things. I got to launch Visual Studio releases. I got to launch .NET releases. I got to work on developer conferences, digital and physical. And all of it was very different. I feel like my job changed constantly. And through that whole time, I basically got to leverage small pieces of everything I ever did before, right? Because it was like, hey, create a training workshop for our customers to support this launch. And I'm like, oh, I know how to create training workshops, and now I have a vendor that can help me build it. So I just got to build a skeleton of what the workshop needs to be. I need to make sure I align a couple of good reviewers that I trust on the subject matter. So it was all about just like managing the details using the knowledge that I had about developers, and that was my 7 years of experience. But I got exposed to things. I learned things that I would never have learned otherwise. people ask me sometimes, like, would you have done this again? Like, if you had to restart your career? Because now I'm a product manager and I'm a very happy product manager. But I would say yes, I would have done marketing again because I learned the value of business development. I learned the value of like revenue generation. I learned the importance of branding, the importance of good marketing, the importance of strong social media. Like there were things that I got to learn and see the data and experience that a PM legitimately doesn't have the reason to get involved with. So to me, I feel very well rounded to be where I am today because of my like I would say three big steps in my career where I did very kind of different things.
If you had to take a step back and as a marketer, what is a misconception that engineers and PMs typically have about your role that you wish they didn't have that would make your job easier?
Oh, I mean, it's a loaded question, but I'll try to answer it. I mean, back when I was doing it, a lot of teams had experience with non-programmers being in that role, right? Because the team that I was on was fairly divergent step from what marketing typically was, right? A group of marketers, and marketers are super valuable people. I'm not trying to say marketing is invaluable, but they have a special skill set. But they're not technical. They don't understand what engineers are doing or why. And this was a constant misconception I was fighting personally. But this doesn't often apply. A lot of times you are working with non-technical marketing teams. So I would say the biggest, more common misconception is that marketing is like a distraction almost, right? It's like, oh, I have to deal with marketing. Marketing is fundamentally a huge part of the reason that you have customers. And if you're building something and you want to have customers, you want the whole machine to support you. It doesn't matter if you're in a small startup with like the marketing team being a person, or if you're the Microsoft scale or any big company where you have groups of people helping you work with them, understand them. This is like a general rule that applies, I think, to all cross-functional relationships. But marketing is so important to make sure that there's ads supporting your product, there's social media supporting your product, that there's the best agencies building your websites, that if you have more technical marketers, they can help you review your blog posts, your go-to-market plan. And in a big organization, marketers often have a horizontal view that developers don't understand because, again, it's not their job. Yeah, so they understand what's going on around the company and they can help bring things together. We often had to do this where a team X and team Y were about to do things on slightly different days of the month. And it's like, you folks should combine. Like it's going to be so much more powerful to make it like a developer day and bring all these topics and make all of this effort that we're going to put in on your behalf in order to get people to look at your release, bring it all together. So I would say that's the kind of misconception that I would fight. That marketing is super important. Be friends with your marketing team.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you've probably seen a lot of the articles and news that talks about how AI assistants and all these things will put marketing and some of these roles like, in jeopardy. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, all technology changes the world, right? And, it's like technology is. I mean, look at where we are compared to 20 years ago. I mean, people 20 years ago wouldn't recognize the world we live in many ways, at least on like the technical side of the world. So I would say intelligent agents are a tool. They're not intelligence, as far as I can tell. Based on I've been reading a lot about this topic. Like they are a way for you to do what you do, hopefully better, faster, with more access to data in a more natural way. So I would say it's all about seeing this as a tool. I don't think it replaces anybody. I mean, of course, it might be somebody that gets replaced. You can't. I can't predict that. So I'm not going to go try to predict something that I'm not an expert in. I don't spend my day job thinking how technology is going to completely replace whole professions. I just look at the technology as it is today. Where it is today, it's very far from replacing anybody. This is my opinion. Maybe I'll eat my words watching this video many years from now, but at least where we are now doesn't feel like it. But at the same time, anybody who's doing any technical field like we are should be learning this technology, using it, keeping an eye on it because it's a powerful tool. It is, I mean, what I'm about to say is not apples to apples by any stretch, but it's like analogous that people went from having code editors, which were just like text file editors, to whole fledged integrated environments with debugging and capability. And if you were like to say, no, I'm going to use Notepad for the rest of my life, you would have missed out on all this productivity and capability, and eventually you would have been replaced because you don't have the right skill set. And I think this is the same kind of journey for now. And then let's see how it goes, man. It's hard to predict.
Yeah, exactly. Like IntelliSense didn't exactly replace developers. Maybe it did, but it definitely made more developers productive, which freed them up for things that are more higher order, that they're more uniquely qualified to solve.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody who thinks marketing can be replaced by an AI bot has never tried to coordinate 10 teams to agree on a launch date for a product. The moment AI can do that, it can have the job. But
I
yeah,
think it'll have
just
a lot
people
of
think it's
it,
big.
it'll have a lot of jobs, if
Yeah,
we can do that part of it, that
yeah,
people wrangling aspect of it.
yeah.
Perfect. So now you're in marketing. You made this switch to product. So talk to me about that leap, because your career is really fascinating, and that's part of the reason I really want to talk to you. Is that you've made many leaps, and oftentimes it was just from an area of deep curiosity about I see this. I'm curious to know more about this. I think I can offer value here. I'm going to try something new, and so that same playbook, product management. How did that come about?
Yeah. So when I was in marketing for a long time, I was very happy, and I didn't foresee myself changing my profession again in my life, right? But I wasn't against it because that's what I did. When I was an engineer, I didn't stick to any vertical. I kept switching the kind of verticals I was in. When I decided not to be an engineer full time, I switched multiple times, to be in different professions. And I was in marketing. I switched probably five, six times to do very different marketing jobs within the organization. So change, for whatever reason, I don't know why, it just was never scary to me. It was like, oh, something fun. Let's go do that, right? They want me, or I can grow. But I definitely hit a point where I had two feelings. I felt like I wasn't learning, like I could do my job just by, you know, doing half a week and I could do my job. That feeling, like I think I got this to that level of detail. And the second thing was I just wasn't happy. I didn't have this excitement in me was dying. And my wife even noticed. She was like, "You seem upset. Well, you seem more upset than usual." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm thinking big things. I don't think I want to be a marketer anymore. I think I've learned everything I've wanted to learn. I think I've done everything I wanted to do, and I didn't feel stretched anymore. And I asked myself a fundamental question, which I still ask myself all the time today: am I growing? Right? And I think at some point, maybe that won't be an important question. Maybe at some point I'll see retirement over the horizon, and I'll be like, okay, I'm just finishing my career. But I'm so far from that emotionally that if I'm not learning, if I'm not growing, I wanted to change. So product became that next challenge. I saw what product managers did. I worked with them all the time as a marketer at Microsoft. I spent my whole day talking to either marketers or product managers. It was basically the two groups I interacted with. And I knew so many of them, including you. And I went to talk. Amanda Silver was I think, probably the first person I reached out to because she had, like, as a lead in the PM team, she had very broad visibility and available jobs out there. And I said to her, like, hey, you know me well, I work hard, but I have I have no proof that I'll be a good product manager. I think I will. You gave, I'm sure, good reasons. I'm sure I said something smart. And she said, hey, why don't you interview for this role? So I went and interviewed for one role, and they didn't like me. Like, they said no. Like, half the team voted no, and half the team voted yes. And I was like, okay. But then there was another team that needed a PM in the same wider organization, very different role, and it was very close to what I used to do when I was a consultant. I used to build a lot of XAML applications, and this was the XAML tooling PM. So I became, to make a long story short, I became the XAML tooling PM as my first PM job, and eventually got to work on .NET and other things at Microsoft. And it was really, really gratifying career, but I was so thankful that people took a chance on me, right? I had no track record as a PM. What attracted me to PM was just how I thought amazing it was to be part of the engineering team, not need to write code for a living. I still to this day build samples and toy and everything, but like writing code wasn't a thing. And I still, after even many years away from writing code, I still didn't want to go back there as a full time job. I like to tinker. I didn't want to do it full time. But yet, being part of the product team, I could actually make decisions on what a product looks like, and I can actually solve developer problems. And I'm very passionate for that. I love solving developer problems. It's what I think about when I'm driving. I'm always thinking about how to make developer lives better for whatever product I'm involved. And on the marketing side, there was a very clear cutoff on where I could add value. And as a product manager, I realized, hey, I could be the one making some of those decisions. So I took a shot, I did it, and I fell in love. And honestly, I don't know if I'll do another job. Like I don't think, maybe my title will change, but this product thing is where I feel really, really comfortable nowadays.
Absolutely, because product management is such a wide range of roles and responsibilities in many ways. It's almost as if, like, people do have different categories of product managers that you typically think about, but it does have a long runway in depending on your hobbies and how much you evolve because people change, people grow, and product management, and what keeps me motivated in product management is that it evolves in many ways with you, or you can just stretch it just a little bit to have it still be what you're working on while focusing on something that you're now more passionate about.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
it's a
same
great
question
job.
again that I asked about from the marketing side. What is it about product management that you wish people you worked with knew more about that they can then, better help you out in the long run?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think in a big company, product management has become pretty well established. I'm excited to see that because it really wasn't for many, many years. There was a lot of questions like, why do we need PMs? I think most people working at the Microsoft and Googles of the world don't have that question anymore. I think we add concrete value. But I think people coming into the profession often ask me, like, if I become a PM, what am I going to do? Like, it's scary. Like, it's just, as a coder, I know what I would do. But as a product manager, it feels like this you're thrown into this void without a lot of definition. And the way that I describe the value that the profession brings, we are unifiers. We are sitting in a place to unblock our engineering team from anything that blocks them from having success. And that includes making sure they have a good plan. Sometimes it's cobbling a plan together from a lot of different ideas. Sometimes it's by providing a first draft of the plan. As a product manager, you're not alone. You're not like on a mountain saying, go this way, and everyone goes this way. It's more like you're on the ground with your team. It's, I did a very different thing in my life. I was a volunteer police officer when I was young with the NYPD, and I was a sergeant as my highest rank there. And as a sergeant, I was on the ground with a bunch of volunteer police officers, and I'd be like, okay, you guys move that barricade over there. You two stand over there, make sure traffic isn't coming through. Like I would organize people to that level of degree. When I became a PM, I felt like that was what I was doing again. Like, you two, carry the barricade over there, please. I think it's a good idea. If that barricade wasn't in front of our customers, let's get rid of the barricade. So I was basically like pointing in right directions by having the time to look around, to look at customers deeper, to look at data deeper, to look at what solution we're building and try to help the engineering team make sense of it. Not because engineers can't do this, right? It's that's a fallacy that PMs like do something very different than what other people can do. It's just that that's what we're allowed to do with our time, and that is magical, right? An engineer, like, you have a sprint backlog, you got to go build your code, get rid of your bugs. As an engineering manager, you have to make sure your team's unblocked and they're being effective. As a PM next to them, you can spend time on the customer, you can spend time on the data, and that is what makes this role so special. What you do varies greatly. I mean, you know this so well, right? It really depends. Sometimes you're writing a document, other times you're forcing people into meetings for a month, other times you're forcing to make a hard decision be made and stop it from blocking. And other times you're advocating for the team to leadership, or advocating for the team to other teams around you to make sure the work can get done. And it's a tough job, but it's extremely rewarding. And if you do it well, everybody knows why you're there. And I think it's definitely doable. I know lots of very successful PMs out of college nowadays. Like, it's really fun to see that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's always evolved with the PM discipline is, when I joined as a PM many years ago, there still was the question, what is the value PMs really provide? I think Microsoft actually called them program managers, and product
Yes.
managers were what marketing people were. And then you also mentioned for a moment that a lot of marketing people back then weren't very technical. At least in some of the divisions I was in, we had the technical product manager, which was a marketing person who worked very closely with engineering teams to translate some of these requests in a more sensible way. And we evolved greatly since that point of view. I think now when I look across the industry, I think product manager is what we do now as part of the engineering team working on various projects. Marketing is its own discipline. I think the role of technical product manager, I think it fell into like I think developer relations to a certain extent, where they spend a lot of time interfacing between the engineering team and marketing team and the outside world. And I'd be curious to know like how this changes going forward as well, because the roles are changing, and I think partly it's because just awareness of the roles. Technology has made a lot of things simpler. Things that were very difficult back then are more straightforward now, or maybe we don't need a dedicated person for this. We can have a person that now does job A, but also B and C because they now have more time to process some of these things more effectively. So that's actually been pretty interesting on that. And the other big thing also that's actually interesting is that back then it was always a case where you need to have industry experience to be a product manager, especially when you are coming into the field. Nowadays it's become more of a we have a career path now where product managers can start at a more junior level and then have a trajectory where they can go because there's been data and experience, whereas before it truly was a choose your own adventure book. No one really knew what you did, but it was kind of like one of those things where, but you knew there was a product manager involved. The thing went really well. It's like, okay, I don't know what they did, but I knew indirectly they did some really great work, and so it's an evolving field in that sense. And so I'm curious to hear your take on it. What are the most important skills a product manager should have to be successful? Let's
That's
take
a good
early.
question.
It's going to vary depending on what stage of your career in. Let's
Yes,
take early.
a lot.
A common question I get from so many people is that I'm currently in college. I want to be a product manager. What's important? And there's the literature and there's the actual on the job answer that you and I probably might deviate from literature a bit on. So I'm curious to hear your take on it.
Yeah, for sure. And let's narrow this down even a little bit more, right? Every product managers can be from many different products. You can be a product manager, like let's use Google as an example. You can be working in Gmail. You could be making sure people have the best email experience, right, in the world. You could be working on some machine learning thing where your customers are Python developers and no one ever sees like some UI. It's all about models and Python code, etc. You can be a product manager that's delivering developer services like we do, right? Products that developers touch and interact with on the CLIs and in consoles. So product managers can be very different. You can also have product managers building hardware, and like again, it's an unlimited number of things they could be working on. So let's look at a product manager who is in a technical space, right? Because we're probably talking to some people who are in the technical space who are watching this video, and that's where me and you are most comfortable with. So if you want to be a product manager for developer products, and you're coming out of college, right, or you're just entering college, and this is your goal, the question I would say, and this is the same question no matter what you want to product manage, is do you have a passion for the thing you want to be a product manager in? Now, this is not a requirement. Lots of people find passion after they begin their career, but it helps, right? So find a passion, and if your passion is hardware, try to become a PM for hardware. If it doesn't work out, maybe fall back on something else just to get the experience, but at least it'll give you some path to head towards. Then, as you're heading towards it, your skills will mostly be generic, but then there's going to be a few specifics. So if you're going for, let's say, hardware, get to know hardware, learn everything you can about hardware. It's such a great opportunity before you get to that PMing a hardware team. Become a person who understands hardware. How is hardware assembled? How is stuff sourced? Get as broad a view into that industry as possible, because that industry knowledge is going to help you. Same as in people becoming PMs in my world, right, in your world, where do some programming. You don't have to, your goal is not for you to become a programmer, right? The goal is for you to have empathy for your future customer. The goal is for you to understand the terminology of your future customer. Whatever thing you're going to PM, get that understanding, terminology, empathy, and some understanding of like the broader thing that's happening. So that's a very important skill. It's like a let's call it a bonus skill. You can probably get away with like learning that on the job, but if you get there with this mindset, you will be ahead of many other people. The next more foundational skills that you need that are just like fundamental to every PM is communication. PMs communicate. They write, they speak, and they listen. And those are things that are all very different, and some of them are harder than they sound. As a PM, you have to be able to articulate to people what you need. You need to articulate to them, you need to understand from them what they need from you, and you need to communicate broad enough that people get all on the same page. And sometimes that's a meeting, sometimes that's a deck, sometimes that's a doc, Sometimes that's a tweet. Many ways to communicate nowadays, but you need to learn this communication skill. And as part of that, it's people, right? The most fundamental thing is people. You should get good at interacting with other humans. You should be able to talk to new people you've never met before. You should be able to stop talking and listen to them. I struggle from that sometimes. I'm a talker, so it's not easy to do all these things, but this like talking and listening and communicating in different forms will save you so much grief becoming a PM. Uh, the next thing is organization. You need to find ways to get organized. And it's not a battle I think you'll ever win. You never get to the point where like, well, I've learned how to organize myself and now I'm always organized. If your career is growing, you're going to get randomized. There's going to be a lot of things for you to do. But as a PM, that's a huge part of how you add value. You do things time in a timely fashion. And trust me, when you don't, you'll feel the guilt, and that'll inspire you to get this skill figured out one way or another. And then finally, you as a product manager need to learn what you do as a product manager in the context of where you're working, and that's a skill you can prepare for it. In classes nowadays and courses online, they'll teach you the various document types you're likely to have to generate, and they'll teach you the various styles of like communication you have to do, and they'll teach you how to analyze data and how to engage with customers. But you're going to have to learn how to bring all of that together into like an executable package of activity. And you're going to have to learn how to apply that to different problems, because not every problem is solved with data. Not every problem is solved with customer engagement. And you have to start building up a skill that understands the difference between all those things, what they give you and what they don't give you, and learning how to like apply that. Like we talked about Chat GPT eventually, and how to use the bots, how to apply all the skills, all the tools at your disposal well to be able to do your job. There's plenty of times where people have said to me, the data shows X. And I'm like, the data can't be right, and then I take out the customer development playbook. Let's go talk to customers and make sure the data is right. And you talk to customers and they're validating the hunch that the data seems to be off. Like this is not what customers are actually wanting or experiencing. Other times you're going to do the opposite, where you're going to bring in data and be like, look, we're not heading in the right direction. But if you don't learn that there's tools and you don't learn what all the tools are, and this video today is not about teaching you every tool, but like there's a toolbox, and a lot of it is soft skills, and a lot of it is just knowing how to engage in certain directions and get information out of it. And that's going to be super important.
That's a fantastic answer right there. I think should be recorded and played back at any PM bootcamp or MBA program out there, Dimitri. Well, thank
You're
you
going to
so
make me
much
blush.
for the time. This was absolutely thrilling, and can't wait to see all the other stuff that you keep sharing and doing as well. So
Thank you, Kirupa. Great talking to you.